everybody. Welcome back to Ask the Pastors today on July the 28th.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, Mark. Yep, it is my birthday, and I'm spending it with you. Well,
Yep.
you, Mark, and y'all who are watching.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for the delay. We're going to have our pal Alec on. I just disappeared from my own screen. That's so weird. Anyway, we're going to have our pal Alec on, but just as we were ready to go on, his audio was not working, and so we're trying to fix that. But anyway, hopefully he's working on trying to fix it, and then he'll be back with us. So hopefully my internet holds out. It's weird. I've had a few good weeks of this working without any problems. So weird. How are you today, Mark?
Oh, pretty good, surviving VBS, I guess.
Yeah. It's been a week for sure.
Yeah, it's going pretty well. They're good. Got some good groups there, and got some good helpers with me, and it's just I'm starting to get into getting used to it. That first night was a bit of a I wasn't, it was kind of a shock a little bit because you have 5 sessions of 20 minutes and there's 5 minute in between, but really that's not enough time for anything. You know, because like you've got to set up for the next one and then they're there.
Right.
So it's basically like a 2-hour stint. And
these go by really fast though. At least that's what I remember from when I did story time. Like you're
yeah,
just about ready to restart and go again.
it went by faster last night. But no, it's good, and it's I'm trying to make it interactive for the kids as much as I can. But even with that, filling 20 minutes, a solid 20 minutes with a story, and it depends. Like the older kids, it's a lot easier. The 3 and 4-year-olds, that gets to be definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But it works,
Yeah.
It works. Because I don't even preach for 20 minutes usually,
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I usually like 15 to 18 minutes maybe or something. I don't know, but
yeah. But we're through 3 nights of it, so we got 2 nights to go. And good news for you is that tomorrow night the sessions are shorter because it's the closing night. So we cut the sessions a little bit shorter and get ready for the actual closing. So
yeah.
But it's been a blast. This has been the biggest VBS that we've done in the history of VBSs here at Trinity. 2 nights ago, we had 123 kids there, which is the biggest group we've had all at once. I think the highest we've ever had registered before was like 116. So we have way more than that registered, but not everybody can make it every night. And so that's been really awesome. The offering has been awesome as well. We're supporting Mission Central and missionaries in the Dominican Republic, and we started the week with a goal of $300 to raise to send them, and we blew by that goal by night 2. So that was Monday night, and then we raised the goal to $600. We doubled the goal for last night, and we passed the goal again last night. We got about $605 or something, and so now we've bumped it up again to $1,000 to see if we can hit that over the next 2 nights. And I have a feeling that will not be a problem given the way that things have been going. So it's pretty awesome to see these kids supporting them.
Yeah. We're very not normal people, as old missionary Gary would say down there in Mission Central.
This is true. I should say good morning to Nancy Sorensen and Marilyn Simpson, who are both on watching with us this morning. There are a few other people who are watching, so this, as always, is your encouragement to put a note in the comment section. Let us know that you're here watching with us. Our theme this year revolves around rainforest explorers and Jesus leading the way, and that's been a pretty exciting thing. And the decorations have been awesome. If you haven't had a chance, and you can get onto our Trinity Facebook page, you should check out the pictures. But also, we did a Facebook Live tour of the decorations on Sunday night, so you can scroll back up in the list for that and check out the tour. We've got some pretty awesome volunteers who put this all together, and so one of them even is a regular Ask the Pastors viewer, Joe Sentgraf, but I don't know that Joe's on here yet.
Probably working on VBS stuff already.
Yeah, or taking a nap from all the hard work. They've been working nonstop and here late into the nights to get ready for the next day. So kudos to them. Also, my mom is watching. She says good morning. They're at their gate in Chicago. They were here the last week, and I dropped them off at the airport in Fort Dodge this morning, and they're flying from Fort Dodge to Chicago to Fort Wayne, and they've got a long time to wait, though. Their flight got in at, 9:30 this morning, and I don't think their next flight goes out till 2:30, so they got all sorts of time to kill today.
Yeah. Well, it's a big airport.
That's true.
Lots to see.
I think they'll probably just camp out at the gate and be ready to go. She, in the car this morning, she goes, I don't know if I'll make it on for Ask the Pastors. I said, oh, you got all sorts of time to kill. Here's Alec.
Hello.
Hey, look, your
greetings.
Sorry,
although
technical difficulties here.
I think you've got me in on a loop.
Yeah, I'm on a loop
myself twice.
Hello.
That's a fun trick.
Can the people out there hear the loop?
Probably.
All of our listeners, watchers, you watchers and you holy ones.
Oh, now we can't hear anything.
And now we can't hear Alec.
Hear the loop, but we can't hear Alec either.
So Alec was the... Yep, your mom says echoing. Because now it's echoing again.
How about now?
I can
How
hear
about
myself again.
And I can hear myself.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
And then we can hear you.
Is there an echo now?
Not you,
I guess,
but just from us.
So I guess Alec is going to be just taking this one.
I'm sorry. I am having terrible technical difficulties today. I'm not sure what's going on.
It's a pretty good trick there, Alec.
I can only hear you all once.
Oh, that's weird. Because I can hear... Well, I can hear my feed into my headphones, but then I can hear it go to you and come back.
All right.
So take it away, Alec. If you wanted to do the whole show,
it's just my. You
could just ask.
See, because if I mute you, then it doesn't happen. But then I unmute. I couldn't hear that, but I assume you're going to change your microphone out, you said, or something. I do read lips fairly well. So, anyway. Yeah, so Mom said taxiing took a long time. That's because you're at O'Hare, and you got to drive 3 miles to get to the gate.
Big airport.
No, so when you have setups like this, sometimes you can get audio straight out of the little interface that we have, but sometimes you can send it into the computer and come back. And that's, I think, what we were getting there. But this is our adventure for today.
Yep.
Another good note for anybody who's watching, if you want to leave a comment and let us know that you're here, that would be awesome. Alec just jumped out to try to fix his stuff again. But yeah, you should check out the VBS decorations on the Facebook page and just look at all that hard work that they've put in there.
Absolutely.
Today we have a good question that we're going to get to. Hopefully, if Alec's equipment works. If not, we'll give him another minute or so and then take it up. I hate to start it before he gets here. Let's see, what else? Oh, I don't know how we forgot this. The Cowles had a baby, which is why Pastor Cowell is not here with us today. They were scheduled, and I think I even said this, they were scheduled to be induced last Friday. And so I texted Pastor Cowell on Friday and said, "Hey, happy baby day." And he texted me back and he said, "Apparently there are a lot of pregnant ladies in Fort Dodge this week because they were informed on Thursday night that their induction on Friday was getting bumped back to Monday." So they got bumped back. And I'm going to see if I can share this picture. But then Monday, late in the afternoon, Amelia Opal Cowell was born. Everybody's doing really well. They had to stick around in the hospital till today before they could get discharged, but theoretically they're getting discharged here this morning. So Pastor Cowell thought he was probably more important for him to be there than here, and we agreed. But so praise God for that. We're thankful that everybody's healthy and well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so that's an exciting thing. You can keep them in your prayers as well.
Yep. Amelia. That's a really nice name. My grandma's name was Amalia.
Oh yeah,
So pretty close, but
close.
yeah.
I just, when I said that, thought of Amelia Bedelia. I don't know if you ever read those books when you were a kid. There's
Sounds
a series
familiar.
of children's books called Amelia Bedelia.
It's familiar, but that's a
yeah.
good name. I like that, Amelia.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's exciting, and thanks be to God.
Mm-hmm. That is for sure. Well, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say, Mark? Otherwise, we can get to our question of the day. So I got this sent to me last week, wondering if we could maybe talk about this a little bit. It's from a little devotional book that somebody had, but it's from Bonhoeffer and his discipleship book, and they wondered if we could talk about it just a little bit. So maybe first it's worth just reading it in case you can't quite read it on your screen. It says, "Is the price that we're paying today with the collapse of the organized churches anything else but an inevitable consequence of grace acquired too cheaply? We give away preaching and sacraments cheaply. We perform baptisms and confirmations. We absolved an entire people, unquestioned and unconditionally. Out of human love, we handed over what was holy to the scornful and unbelievers. We poured out rivers of grace without end, and but the call to rigorously follow Christ was seldom heard. What happened to the insights of the ancient church, which in the baptismal teaching watched so carefully over the boundary between the church and the world, over costly grace? What happened to Luther's warnings against a proclamation of the gospel, which made people secure in their godless lives? When was the world ever Christianized more dreadfully and wickedly than here? What do 3,000 Saxons whose bodies Charlemagne killed compare with the millions of souls being killed today? The biblical wisdom of the sins of the fathers are visited on the children unto the third and fourth generations has become true in us. Cheap grace was very unmerciful to our Protestant church." So, kind of an interesting observation on the culture and society. And Bonhoeffer is not a contemporary author, at least not in the way that we think about contemporary. Mark, you got anything you want to tell us about Bonhoeffer? Just like introduce us to him.
Yeah, Bonhoeffer. I usually call him Bonhoeffer, but Bonhoeffer I think is the more probably correct pronunciation. He was a pastor originally in the German state church, which was a union church that came. It was like a Lutheran and Reformed this union that happened in the 19th century. So he was a pastor in that church, and when the Nazis came into power in Germany, Bonhoeffer was very critical of them. Interestingly, later on, he came to America at one point, and he studied at Union Theological Seminary, and that was when the war, I think, had just got started in terms of America being in it. But he ended up going back to Germany, and he became and I don't know if I'm getting the timeline completely right, but he became a double agent, actually. So he worked for the German government, basically the Nazis, but he was actually a spy working with this underground group that was trying to get rid of Hitler. And he was part of he was part of at least one plot, probably multiple plots, to try and assassinate Hitler, and they all failed. One of them led to him being arrested and eventually sent to a concentration camp, and then he was hung. And in that concentration camp, it was like right before the war was done. Like he just barely, it was something like months or something, maybe, or less. But anyway, so Bonhoeffer's writing this. He started this. He helped start this this movement called the Confessing Church, which was a group of theologians, I believe. There's Reinhold Niebuhr was part of that. Originally, even like Hermann Sassa was kind of part of that briefly, and then there was some issues later with that. But so this Confessing Church were anti-Nazi because the Nazis had taken control over the state church of Germany. And so this Confessing Church was in opposition to the Nazis, and they started their own seminary, and Bonhoeffer was like in charge of it. And that's when he got in trouble and got that shut down by the Nazis. And it was after that, I think it was right after that he wrote Costs of Discipleship. I think is right after that seminary got shut down.
Yeah, I think Alex back. Let's see if this works now.
And then he wrote his book on community as well.
Life Together.
Life Together after that as well. Yeah.
Hey, Al.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Hallelujah.
Right. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, continue. I'll pick up in the conversation at some point.
Well, we just we showed this and we read it, and then Mark is just kind of introducing Bonhoeffer and sort of was.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. You can't hear me more, can you?
No, I can. Yeah, we can.
There they are.
We just spun out, though. That was so weird.
Did I spin
We're
out?
back.
I couldn't hear either of you two.
That's so weird.
Okay.
I don't understand.
know what's
life.
I didn't see myself spinning out, but I saw you guys. But I didn't know if I was to you.
I could not hear Tom.
Okay.
Well, now we're back.
If
We're
something
back. We're
if something else happens, I'm just gonna pull out completely.
That's fine. It always
So,
seems like a good idea, but
if I disappear
Yeah.
again, I'm gone for good. But it's
well, welcome back.
yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty, Mark, you have anything else you want to share about Bonhoeffer?
Well, I think just as I said, he wrote Costs of Discipleship, which that quote comes from, I believe, in that context of he's in this confessing church that they're against the Nazis, they're against the state church that has completely been taken over by the Nazis, and they're being they're really, the Nazis are after them, and they're not allowing them to practice freely. And so a lot of what he's saying is obviously in that context, and I think he sees, in broad strokes, he sees that, or he's trying to maybe answer the question, how did this happen that Germany just allowed and is going along with this in some ways, how are the Christians at least going along with it? And this is one way I think of him answering that, in that he's saying, kind of in broad strokes, that they're just kind of going through the motions. They're the average Christian in Germany, doesn't really take their faith all that seriously. And what really is costly to them, what is really valuable to them, isn't so much the gospel and Jesus Christ and the Christian life, but it's, all these other things that the Nazis can take from them and can, make their life a living hell if they don't go along with them. That's what they value. So, and he wrote about like pastors who there were Nazi spies in all the churches, and so they'd be taking notes. So pastors in the state churches were not saying anything that would offend the Nazis, because, well, they didn't want to lose their job, and they didn't want or something worse. So they valued their job, they valued their own life more than they valued Christ and the Word of God. And Bonhoeffer's saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not true Christianity. So,
Yeah. Alec, now that we've got you, what were your reactions to the quote or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for I think that's kind of spot on, at least the way the conversation is going at the moment. Part of that, though, I think, is not only do they not necessarily value the gospel or discipleship as much as they value other things, but I also think that they've confused the gospel for other things. So they kind of got this package of, here's Christianity, and it entails all these different things, and you either either kind of go along with it or you don't. And what Bonhoeffer's doing, he's kind of parsing it out and saying, well, we did kind of receive this package that's been handed down to us, but it's not all Christianity, right? And that's his point, I think, about Charlemagne. It's like, well, yeah, let's see. what do the 3,000 Saxons whose body Charlemagne killed compare with the millions of souls being killed today? The biblical wisdom that the sins of the fathers are visited on the children unto the third and fourth generation has become true in us. And so, I think you could take that, I suppose, as saying, well, maybe the the death count of Charlemagne is uh, less than what's going on today, or you can say it's just a precursor of what's going on today, and it snowballed even more. So Charlemagne's killed his thousands, and Hitler's killed his millions, and but Charlemagne has been a part of the package the whole time. So,
Mhm.
let's see. When was the world ever more Christian? Ever Christianized more dreadfully and wickedly than here? So he's like, this is just. As a German, he's, criticizing Germany itself, even from the earliest days of Germany. I mean, Charlemagne that's kind of the beginning of the German people as a as kind of a more modern nation. 800 AD, crowned Christmas Day as Holy Roman Emperor, and we think of Charlemagne as like the as the king of the Franks, and he was the king of the Franks. But those are the German people. If you look at Charlemagne's empire, it's Germany with a little bit of France. So I would say, all right. So how does this apply not just to the German people, but then to all around the world? I think you see the same. The same thing happening. Look at how. All right. So look at how Charlemagne Christianized Europe. How did Europeans Christianize the Americas? And it's kind of very similar. It's by brute force. And you think, well, is that the wrapping paper of the gospel? It's not supposed to be.
Right.
So for Bonhoeffer, he's kind of like, well, this is just kind of, unfortunately, and especially coming out of the Enlightenment and it all blowing up in everyone's face in World War I, and realizing that people aren't as great as we think. And then you have these totalitarian regimes coming in at the beginning of the 20th century. And Bonhoeffer's kind of saying, well, this is the meat and potatoes of it all. The gospel is just kind of is just a veneer. We haven't really been, it hasn't been the basis. It's just been kind of, again, like the wrapping paper of it. And now when you take that off, then what do you see? So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was thinking, reading that last part too, that you were just referencing about comfort and how comfortable we like to make faith. We don't. I don't know how to say this maybe the right way, but all of the rights without any of the responsibilities, or all of the comfortable stuff without any of the expectations. And I think about comfortable people thinking, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to live in the way that God told me. I don't have to produce any good works. And, that also potentially being some of those millions of souls just because they've been so poorly Christianized. I like the Christianized word that he uses there, but or discipled, that we're discipled to think that we can just sit around comfortably and not worry too much about actually living as Christians, that we can keep doing whatever we want to do, but just claim sort of this, oh yeah, here's my Christianity, my get out of jail free card. And the person who sent this to me, said, couldn't we say this about today? And I'm not sure that I would disagree very much, that a lot of this sounds like it could be written describing our modern church experience too, which, given the fact that this comes in our not so distant history. I mean, at least when he's writing and critiquing this, it shouldn't be surprising because it's not like we've gotten better at our discipling of people. We've only continued to get worse in many ways.
Hmm. Yeah. I, yeah, I think it's very I mean, it's applicable. I think it always, and it's really in many ways it goes all the way back to the New Testament writings. Shall we sin so that grace may abound?
Yeah.
By no means. And I was just looking at actually from Titus 2, chapter 2. I thought of this. For the grace of God, verse 11, for the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. So this is saying, Paul is saying here, the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, and the grace of God trains us to renounce ungodliness and makes us zealous for good works. So I think that's but I think for me, like what I keep going back to for the costly part in talking in those terms is I keep thinking of really of value, and is he your ultimate treasure? And that kind of goes with our VBS theme. Jesus is my treasure. He leads the way.
Yeah.
Because if ultimately if you love anything more than Jesus, that's idolatry. And if you love Jesus because of the things Jesus gives you, that's idolatry. Like,
Yeah.
even this is getting kind of this is maybe getting a little bit splitting hairs, but ultimately even the forgiveness of sins and life and salvation, what does that really mean? Like, if you really love Jesus because he forgives your sins, through him you have forgiveness, life, and salvation. Well, what does that mean? What is life and salvation? Jesus says, I am the life. So if he is not your life, if it's not all leading back to him, then you're not doing it right.
Well, and I think that also gets to the heart of not just the cost of discipleship, but also in this specific quote here, right? Where you kind of have to wonder, like, is Jesus, do we regard him as king, as ruler, as absolute authority over heaven and earth? Or is he just a sacrificial means to get what I want?
Yeah, right.
I actually call this scholastic prosperity gospel, right? Prosperity gospel, we say name it and claim it. And sometimes I refer to this as scholastic prosperity gospel, kill him and claim it. Jesus died so I get what I want. And when that happens, then you can go into the church building and be with your fellow believers and go in as a with a certain life, and then walk out, and then we're you can be told that it's you're a sinner, but don't worry, it's okay, basically. That's not how it's said, but I think sometimes that's what's communicated or that's what's heard. You're a sinner, but it's okay.
Mhm.
And then you can walk out the same person you were when you walked in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of what he's talking about is, baptism is supposed to be like a death and resurrection, death and newness of life. And the Lord's Supper, you're eating his body and his blood, and the crucified Lord is coming inside of you, who's also the risen Lord. And that should have a profound impact on the way that you see the world, the way that you live, your everything, which is why we do it. But if it's a matter of just coming in and walking out this, you're the same person. Well, then it's like, well, what's it's just a facade again. And I think that's kind of what he's talking about is that no, it's supposed to like change you. It's supposed to transform you.
Mhm.
And when that happens, then that means a part of that transformation is kind of giving up the things that were near and dear to you, at least as far as, idolizing them.
Yeah.
Because if we're just going to idolize those things anyways, then why? I mean, if some worldly authority figure just gives you everything you want anyways, then you don't really need Jesus. So if you have to then choose between the worldly authority figure that gives you everything and Jesus, because remember they were prepackaged, right? They were packaged together for so long. But if now you're dissecting things and you realize that hey, maybe these two things don't go along with each other, which one are you going to choose? Well, you're going to choose the one that gives you house and a land and family and security and all these things. The Jesus thing was just kind of an add-on in the first place.
Which is some of the disruption that we're seeing in Christianity, at least in America today. Of we've lived so long in Constantinianism of the church and the state, like you're saying, being so closely intertwined that as sort of a more secular perspective really is taking hold. Sometimes it's a challenge for us in the church to even know how to exist because we've never existed without the state before, and so. But I think I think you make a good point here, which helps us understand the cheap grace piece because I don't know, as a Lutheran, you get a little bit anxious to start talking about cheap grace or because shouldn't grace be free? Right? Jesus died on the cross to set us free, obviously to live as his people, but there shouldn't be something that we pay for grace. And so I think you help us understand a little bit what we're meaning when we say that it's not that you are required to pay for it, that God charges a tax, but there is an expectation for that transformation that takes place. And so I don't know if either one of you want to say anything more about the idea of cheap grace
Yeah,
and what's actually being said there.
I think Bonhoeffer actually has more of a nuance than that, because Bonhoeffer says in The Cost of Discipleship something like, "You do pay for it. You just can't you can't buy it or you can't earn it." So there's, on the one hand, there's nothing that you can do to earn it. It's way beyond anything that you could ever do, and yet. I think he says something like, "It costs our Savior everything. It'll cost you everything too."
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you still can't earn it. So you have to give up everything, but it'll never be enough.
You pay for it on the back end.
Well, I found I just found online a quote from The Cost of Discipleship. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. It is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life. And it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. And then he does say, above all, it is costly because it costs God the life of his son. Ye were bought at a price. And what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's very. That's the thing with Bonhoeffer. I mean, you or Bonhoeffer. I always get it wrong. Yeah, you got to take it all kind of in as a whole, and I think that's the thing too. Like I was listening to this one podcast about, they were reviewing this, and I think they were saying something like, well, when you read Bonhoeffer or Bonhoeffer, you're getting a lot of the law there, and well, if you want the gospel, go over to Sasa.
Oh, gee.
And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm beginning to think that there are a lot of Lutheran pastors who just don't get law and gospel. I don't know what the issue is, but like, I don't know. It's not good.
We've lost all the nuance, and we've oversimplified it down to the point of it being very, I don't know. Yeah. Misunderstood. You're right.
I don't know if they just, I mean, and I didn't even go to a Concordia. So I went to Luther Seminary. So, and I
was going to say, you didn't even go to a Lutheran seminary.
And
I'm just kidding.
But I didn't even go to a real Lutheran seminary. I mean, well, quite a few of the faculty weren't Lutheran. Well, and well, maybe in some ways I got to see, well, I had to do a lot of my own research and reading and read Walther and all that on my own, and really struggle to get it. But I think what he's talking about is, what effect does the grace of God have on your life? Does it transform you? Last night we did, for our story, Jesus calls his first disciples, the story of Peter, James, and John, and Andrew out fishing, and Jesus calls them. They just leave everything. They leave Zebedee. Just, Zebedee's just standing there going,
guys, hey,
what?
Guys, where are you going?
What are you doing? We got work to do. Well, Jesus is calling us, and so we're following him. And then all those guys eventually end up dying as martyrs. Those disciples eventually. And I think that's what Bonhoeffer is really talking about, I think, here, is like, okay, how does that happen again? Because
I always do think that's such a remarkable part of the story, that Jesus calling the disciples. And, obviously we don't have like everything that happened in those days surrounding that, but sometimes we don't pay close enough attention to the fact that Jesus just comes up and says, hey, follow me. And they go, okay. Because can you imagine that happening today? Can you imagine, Jesus walking in even to one of our churches and saying, hey, follow me, leave everything you've got behind, follow me. You know how much debating we would do? Well, hold on. Let me get my affairs in order. Let me let me stop the mail. Let me give my 2 weeks notice at my job. Let me take care of all this stuff. I'll get back to you, Jesus.
If the answer is yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of package are you offering there? We got retirement.
Right. That's right.
Yep.
Health insurance. How's this going to work?
Yeah, I think that he would be completely unwelcome, and even talking about the law gospel paradigm. I think that Bonhoeffer does a great job distinguishing between law and gospel. What we like to do is divorce the law and the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes, first of all, we don't really define what we mean by law. And we don't realize that certain, proclamation sometimes it can function as both law and gospel, the same proclamation. And again, because we have disengaged ourselves from the broad sense of the gospel. The gospel is the kingdom of God is at hand. That's that's the gospel. That's the good news that Jesus is preaching the good news about the kingdom or about the reign of God, saying that the reign of God is here. Change your minds, repent, turn around, and trust in this good news. Like that's now, so the gospel, this is a good thing because it's something that God is doing. He's kind of taking his creation back. But if you are opposed to God, then that's gonna hurt a little bit. And as human beings, we're broken and we are opposed to God, and so it's going to hurt a little bit. And we call that the law. and but he is gracious enough to put our sinful nature on to death on the cross and bring us back to life and recreate us so that we can be members of the kingdom of God and citizens of his heavenly kingdom. But all of that is lost when it's, oh, you did something bad. Oh, don't worry, you're forgiven for it. And we don't get the larger picture.
Yeah, so
And
what? Really?
it's like, oh, well, then why? Yeah, what's the point? So, but if Jesus is a king who's reigning over heaven and earth and has put himself in a position to die so that he can kind of bring an end, in some sense, to this created order and begin a new created order and allow you to be a part of it and to live as a part of that kind of new creation today, in some sense, looking forward to when he really brings about the restoration and completes it all. Well, then that changes everything. And I think the people that maybe don't like Bonhoeffer, it's for a variety of reasons. One of them is that, so he's close to Karl Barth. And Karl Barth did, with the Luther Renaissance. Karl Barth's the one who reinvigorated the law gospel paradigm in the first place, but he's not a Lutheran. So I think there's maybe a little bit of, I don't know, jealousy or something there. And then, of course, people like to just, cherry pick quoting Hermann Sasse, and as if that's like really doing theology or something. And he's, again, there's quite a few people in the Lutheran tradition, and Bonhoeffer is probably one of them, although less so than others, that you can make them say whatever you want them to say. And that's what happens today with Hermann Sasse. But there's an obsession with him now that is, I think, is ridiculous. Nothing against Hermann Sasse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's well put. I think that you really hit it on the head with the kingship of Christ. That, how many people think of the gospel, like you said, there is the gospel in the wide sense, and that Christ is king over all things, and calls us into his kingdom here and now. And so and he brings us into his kingdom through the forgiveness of sins and through grace. And when we're in his kingdom, we get to live a new life, and that's a good thing because he's freed us from the perishing, the world of things that are perishing, and sin and death and the devil, and now we're in his kingdom. And so to think of things in that sense, I think is we need to probably do more of that. That would be helpful.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you're talking about all of this, that there's sort of this sense that there's neutral ground and that everybody's sort of in neutral ground, and if you're really bad, then you go into the kingdom of Satan, and if you're okay or pretty good, or if you're kind of a Christian, you can kind of hang out over here in God's kingdom, but we'll just kind of hang out here in the neutral zone, and everything will be just fine. I'm not that bad, but I'm also not that good. failing to realize, sure, yes, Satan's got his kingdom, and that's where we all kind of start. But like God's kingdom is the world, is the universe, is everything. And just like being a member of a family or a member of a country or a kingdom, there's certain ways that people live who are part of those things. And God's claim is on you. It's in some ways whether you want it to be or not. And so it's good to be a part of that kingdom. So Alec, I'm glad that you brought that up. And that kingdom comes with expectations. And we want to be a part of that kingdom. And because we've been made part of the kingdom and taken out of eternal death, we should be so thankful also that we would want to live in the way that the king expects us to live.
Yeah, it's like a something that one of my friends likes to say. Following Jesus is hard. And he, he says that, when he sees, people, clear, mess up, and we're always in need of God's grace. We're always in need of that forgiveness, but sometimes it's more obvious to us than other times. And anytime he sees something like that happen, he says, well, yeah, following Jesus is hard. Doesn't mean that you're not a Jesus follower. Just it's hard.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that I see, and I see this in the Bonhoeffer quote also, is that we don't realize that the kingdom of God does have a different way of operating than the kingdoms of this world. But we tend to be drawn to the kingdoms of this world and their ways of operating. And so you brought up Constantinianism before, Tom.
I bringed it up.
I bringed it up
good.
And you talk about Constantinianism, and you kind of have to wonder all right, we talk about the Roman Empire was Christianized. It's like, well, it changed the names of the gods, maybe some redecorating inside the basilicas, but the way of operating was just like Rome. It's really no different. But that doesn't mean that there aren't Christians all over the place. Look at that. I mean, I think of like the peasant who's living under someone else's reign and rule, and they are just trying to get by in their lives, and they're told that Jesus is the rule of the universe, and they believe it. And it's funny because the people that are telling them that are the ones who don't believe it. I think y'all see the movie that came out a few years ago, The Book of Eli, with Denzel Washington?
Mm-hmm.
I did not.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah, all right. So it's interesting. I've got a lot to say about which I'm not going to say here, but it's really interesting because there's this. They're after this book. The antagonists are after this book, and Denzel Washington is protecting this book. And there's some interesting little twists and turns, especially at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one guy who's really he says, if I have that book, then I can control people. And it's a Bible. You find out pretty early. You realize it's a Bible pretty early on, I think. But he's like, if I have that book, I can control people. And that's why he wants the book. And Denzel Washington is protecting the book. And at one point, he gets his hands on the book. Very, very late, and his slave, one of his slaves, because it's like a post-apocalyptic thing, and he's got all the power, he operates the way the world operates. He's got all of his goons out there wreaking havoc and bringing people in and doing all this. He's got his little empire there, but he acquires this book, and one of the people that he is dominated reads the book because he's acquired it. And you can see the difference between the way that he sees it and she sees it. And she sees it as, this is salvation. And so she kind of comes to faith when she hears the good news or reads the good news. And I think that's what's happened all over the world, is that you do have people that are going to use the name Jesus to gain authority and power in the world. But at the same time, so many people that they have dominated, hearing, with whereas the ruler means it's for evil, the person who's on the receiving end receives it for good in some sense. I don't mean the domination and the violence and all that, but the message that God has made his way into their hearts through all of this other garbage. And I think that's pretty profound and pretty incredible. So even though Constantinian Christianity, I think, is a complete farce, the lowly and the person the person that's living in the empire who does believe in Jesus, Christianity is alive and well, just not in the ways that we see it from a historical perspective. It's not in the gold statues and all the ornate stuff. It's in the lowly life of the person who just trusts in Jesus above all things, even though the people that are telling them about Jesus are being terrible to them, abusing them. It's very ironic.
Well, that's where, how hard it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's not until everything else, every other comfort and support is stripped away, that you're truly driven to rely on God. And the more you try to balance your reliance on other things with relying on God, the more easy it is to get distracted and pulled away. And, you guys mentioned idolatry before and all that stuff that, it's almost easier for people who have nothing, to throw themselves fully on reliance on God, because what else is there? And the more we have, the more we're tempted to think that we can support ourselves, or that, somebody else is going to support us. And, I don't know if we've talked about this on here. I think, Alec, you and I have talked about it on the other podcast that we do, but this is why it's so scary sometimes for Christians, when they think like the culture is changing or government favorability is changing. There's a sense that if we can just get the government to pass the right laws, or if we can just get the government to do the right things, then Christianity will thrive. And that's another example of this, where we think that if we can just get the right people to support us, then everything will be great. Where really, we throw ourselves onto the king of the universe, because, spoiler alert, he's not going to fail. Like he's in charge. He's going to be in charge, and he's the only one who can take us all the way. Great, vote, participate in the political process, be involved, that's fine, but don't confuse that with your savior.
And he clearly does not want his kingdom to look like the kingdoms of this world. So
Right.
Why do we want his kingdom to look like the kingdoms of this world? That's like he literally would rather die than for his kingdom to look like the kingdoms of this world. That's what happened. He would rather die than have that happen. And yet, as Christians, we find ourselves going back to that and wanting it to look like everyone else. And it's the same problem that God's people have always had. Give us a king. Give us a temple. Give us all this stuff. We want to be just like everyone else. And he's like, no, you're the opposite of everyone else. Right.
Yeah. Well,
the king is going to rule over you and dominate you and, cause you all sorts of trouble. But we want a king because everybody else has one.
Right. I mean,
what's interesting though too with that is in Bonhoeffer's case, I'm just gonna call him Bonhoeffer. Not Bonhoeffer, whatever. So Bonhoeffer, he eventually comes to believe that a lot of the problem was quietism amongst the German Christians, and he actually ends up dying because he gets so involved with that he becomes part of a plot to assassinate the leader of the country. That's pretty politically involved right there.
Well,
So I guess what I'm saying is like, you know, so for Bonhoeffer at least, yeah, I mean, you have this, yeah, Jesus is king over all things, but I think for him, part of that is the grace and the effect in your life is going to and needs to have effect in all aspects of life, including politics. You know, I
yeah.
I think that's a lot of what he was, or at least where he ended up. At
Well,
least where he ended up believing that, okay, we need to kill Hitler.
yeah.
That's a Christian thing to do.
Well, see, I think that's actually a very ironic position for him to hold, because he 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 knows what's going to happen. I mean, he fulfills Jesus' own statement: "If you live by the sword, you will die by the sword." And um, and I think that, I don't, and I'll say this, and I'll be interested in hearing your comments on this, but you know, killing, like, we're not called to kill. We're not called to kill people. You might be presented with two impossible situations in which one is going to walk out alive and the other one won't. Um, but it doesn't mean that either of those options are good, or let's say Christian. I speak as, both my granddads were pilots in the war. One Pacific Theater, one was a B-17 pilot shot down over Naples, in prison for 18, 19 months, Polish death march. And my great grandparents were, living with my grandmother and her brother in Luxembourg, and they were Ashkenazi Jews. And everything was taken away, and my grandmother and her brother and their grandmother left, and they never saw their parents again after the Nazis parachuted in. And I've been to Luxembourg, and I've taken they've got a Nazi tour where they have pictures of what it looked like with all the swastika flags, and then you can look at it now, and see the difference. Um, and unfortunately, I think that's one of the things that drives us to acting like the rest of the world, is that uh, to us, death is the ultimate end, whether we want to admit it or not. And Jesus is saying, no, it's not. And Jesus calls us uh, to to not act that way. And he says, if you do, then you are going to be on the receiving end of it as well. And I think that's one of the problems. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're in a situation where there is no option, someone's going to walk out alive and the other person isn't. Well, what do you do? Well, whatever you ask for, you at the end of the day, it's a matter of begging God for forgiveness, which He will give to you. But I say beg because I think it's important to highlight uh, the intensity of that situation, right? Or that it's no small thing. And so yeah, and I've talked to people who have been in that situation before, and sometimes we all they're in need of is absolution.
This is one of the effects of the Constantinian of Constantine, and what happened with that is in Germany before the Second World War, and the generally the people just thought that, well, our government leaders are put in place by God, and you just don't question them, you don't oppose them. When von Bismarck was, united the country, it's like, oh, well, this is all divinely appointed and so on. So the idea of going against the leaders or going against the government was considered to be unchristian. so so in some ways, yeah, for Bonhoeffer, it and them, they were challenging that, I think, in many ways, saying that, sometimes you do need to oppose the government leaders, depending on the gravity and what's going on. And I think I'd have to read, I don't know, does he write, because he wrote some letters from prison or when he was in, and I know he wrote some letters, and I don't know if he gets into any of this stuff in there. Do you guys know, in terms of this very question? But apparently he thought it was the loving thing to do and the Christian thing to do to try to kill Hitler.
Well, yeah. Again, that's if he doesn't, and this is the same as I would put with my great grandparents and my grandmother, who was in the French underground for years, and my both my granddads, who were, I mean, they were both pilots. One of them was piloted a bomber, right, the Flying Fortress. And that's the question: is somebody's going to walk out and somebody isn't. And so you make a decision, and but I think one of the dangerous part, and this is what we get from Constantinianism. Constantinianism tells us that there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, and the good guy's going to win, or the good guy should win based on the way that the world operates. And I think Jesus is more as like, no, you're all bad, and things are going to happen, and you need to come and ask for forgiveness. And so we do fight wars to protect people, and it doesn't mean that the killing is good, but it might mean that less people are going to die. Like with this is a World War II is a great example of this. All right, so Hitler's defeated, which means that less people are going to die, and he killed millions. Right? It doesn't mean that ending his life is Christian. It just means that it just means that less people are going to die.
Yeah.
You see,
well, you don't want to
There's a
take
distinction
pleasure. I don't. You shouldn't take any pleasure in it. Like this is it's something that you probably wish you didn't have to do, but you might think of it more in like a personal sense. Like if you came across a situation where somebody was killing, unfortunately, like just killing kids at a playground, God forbid, and
we've seen it happen,
right? And
plenty.
maybe you're not armed, but you have the opportunity where you could go tackle the guy.
Yep.
And you go tackle him, and in tackling him, you get into a scruffle, and you figure out the only way this guy is going to stop is if I get a hold of this gun and shoot him.
Yep. Which happens plenty.
And you happen to get the gun from him, and he's running at you, and you pull the trigger. Well, you're not happy about it. I mean, you wouldn't take any pleasure in it. I would hope no one would, but there'd be a relief. And in a sense, that's a good thing in some sense, that you save the lives of some kids. Right. I don't know.
I would say that you would, because we live in a sinful, broken world, you are making a calculated decision that's still sinful and broken, and that doesn't mean that it's righteous, or even faithful to Jesus. But I don't think there's any situation. There isn't anything that you could do That would be fate. I mean, if you don't stop the guy, he's going to keep killing people, right? So you're kind of you're stuck, and that's why we can't get out of this. See, this is what I love about Lutheranism is you can't get out of this world unscathed. Like it's impossible. And so so if that happens, of course, you'll end your picture will be on TV. You'll be called a hero, and you'll be sitting there thinking, "Well, I just killed somebody," and they'll say, "But you saved so many people," and you think, "Well, but I also killed somebody." And what you need at that point, you need to go and be absolved of that, and ask for forgiveness and receive forgiveness, as opposed to having your actions justified.
Which is kind of an interesting response of the conscience in that situation, which kind of goes to the point that I think you're trying to make is that, most people who, I shouldn't say most, that's a generalization, but many people who find themselves in a situation like that don't feel good after it's done, don't feel heroic, and actually struggle with that for a long, long time because, your conscience is telling you that you've just done something that, I don't know, you could argue God's law that's written on your heart tells you not to do, but, Mark, to your point, you're doing it for the protection of others. And, it gets into all of the stuff about, Christian soldiers' consciences and things too. Luther has to write about, can a soldier be saved? This is an actual, question that comes up of, if you are doing this, can you even still be considered Christian? Which, yes, but it's an interesting conversation. We're way out of time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to bring this back up again, but it's an interesting train of thought to pursue because we do justify actions in a variety of ways. And we do have to deal with a variety of lesser evils rather than good options. That there are many situations that we find ourselves in where there aren't good choices. There are just less bad choices. And how do we, or at least in our minds, they're less bad. But, how do we make those choices and how do we make those decisions in a way that is faithful? And at the end of the day, remembering the gift of absolution, come and be absolved of the times that our less bad choice is still not a righteous choice. So good, interesting turn. I'm glad your equipment started working out so you could be with us. And
yeah, well, sorry again for the. I don't know what's going on. So
we'll go a little bit longer so that we could finish out the thought. But yeah, good stuff. So, as always, if you've got a question or comment that you want us to take up in a future week, go to our website, trinityalgona.org/askthepastors. Submit the question. We'd love to talk about it, and we'll be back next week. We don't have a new topic yet, but we'll be back with something, and we'll be able to keep on with these interesting conversations. So, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.